Thank you for coming on time. I hope you're all still awake after a great lunch. Probably one of the best DrupalCamp lunches that I've had ever. So thank you for the organizers.
You hear that, Richard?
I'm going to try to have content that keeps people awake. So let's see. I have plenty of demos from Experience Builder that I've recorded just freshly today, right before the talk, so they are up to date to show Experience Builder. Something to note is also that towards the end of the presentation, I have a very exclusive demo of something that has never been talked in a Dries note or in my presentations before. So look forward to that. I think it's going to be something pretty exciting. All right. So to kick the presentation off, my name is Lauri Timmanee. I'm a senior product manager at Acquia, and I'm the product lead for the Experience Builder initiative. I've been part of the Drupal community for 14 years. I've been doing Drupal for a little bit longer than that, but that's when I joined Drupal.org. And I've been part of many of the initiatives, especially after Drupal 8 was announced. Probably most relevant here is that I was leading the admin UI modernization initiative where we built Claro, which then essentially led into folks building Gin as the follow-up step. I have a lot of content to cover, so I have 10 different things that I would like to talk about. As you can see, we have the exclusive preview even in here, the agenda. So let's start with the basics of what is Experience Builder, what is it that we're trying to do. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I assume that most of you have heard about it. Has everyone heard about Experience Builder? Who has heard about Experience Builder before?
Who has heard of it? Yeah.
Almost everyone. Yes, that's good. So, you've probably heard this mentioned 100 times at this point, but this is something that Dries said, which is quite a bit shift for Drupal, which is that Drupal CMS is taking Drupal to be the gold standard of no-code website building. It's very different from what Drupal used to do before Dries made this statement, where we were also open to building web applications and all sorts of complicated things. Now we're saying that, okay, we are focused on no-code website building. We are targeting the marketing people with Drupal CMS. How does Experience Builder fit that goal or vision? There's 3 steps. There's the installation, configuration, and launch. So installation is essentially how do you get Drupal installed, whether that's on a local environment, on a server, somewhere, just get it up and running. After that, before you can actually launch your site, you have to build your site. So that's when you create your custom brand, your content types, whatever you need in order to have something that is launch worthy for your website. That's the configuration step, and that's where Experience Builder comes in. Experience Builder is aiming to basically take all of the steps from there that are hard to achieve today and make them easy. So pretty ambitious goal for us, because Drupal is all about, that building. So that means that we are touching a lot of different parts with the Experience Builder initiative. Most of you probably associate experience building with creating content and creating pages. That's the sort of somewhat more self-explanatory piece. But Experience Builder also aims to solve problems like how do we build components? How do we manage the site design? Because in order to build content, in order to create pages, you have to have components. You must have a design that is worthy of being shown. Olivero is great, but I bet there aren't many organizations in the world that are branded like Olivero. Organizations have their own brand that they want to showcase with Drupal. So we have to make it easy for them to get their brand represented in their Drupal site. All right, let's dive into the Experience Builder then and look at a little bit more visual things. So everything starts by enabling Experience Builder, and now we see an edit button on the top right corner of Drupal when we are on the front page of the site. We click the edit button, and it launches the Experience Builder. But now in Experience Builder, the paradigm of building content is different from how Drupal has historically done. So historically, how Drupal has done is everything is led by your content types, and then you sort of build a theme on top of that. Now with Experience Builder, we are switching that around, where your content model will be the display, rather, of your content types will be informed by what is in the theme. So your theme can own components. Those could be things like buttons, cards, maybe a hero, or slider. And that's what your content types can then feed into. Now with Experience Builder, the idea is that instead of today where Drupal's templates are tied into the specific use case that you have, like you have a view template or you have a template for your node. And then you have to kind of know what is inside the content model. With Experience Builder, because of the components are generic, they're just what is the display, what is the design of the site. We now use Experience Builder then to essentially get existing data that exists in Drupal into these components. So those could be just the regular pages, a simple example. It could be your page template, which is essentially your block layout. It could be content type templates, so those are the managed display of your content types. Or it could be lists even, views, which has its own display builder. So all of these have a different templates today. Now with Experience Builder, you can use these design-centric components in all of these different contexts. So let's dive into what are components. From the perspective of the content creator, what they do is they just see a library on the left, they drag one of these components to the page, and then they can modify them using the form on the right side. As they make changes to these components, they see the preview update in real time to the changes that they're making. As these changes are, as the content creator is making these changes, everything gets saved automatically, seamlessly. The content creator doesn't even notice. So as we made these changes, if we refresh the page, they would see that everything was saved already. This doesn't mean that those changes get published. It's just that they were saved so that if you or another content creator comes back there, that's what they would see as the sort of staged changes in here. So how do we build one of these components? Let's take a look at a very simple component, button. So, Experience Builder components can come from several different sources. You could have single directory components, you could have blocks, which is essentially what you use in Layout Builder as your components, or you could use layouts as one of the components. We're going to focus on the single directory component aspect of feeding components into here right now. So let's look at a simple button that we have in here. What is it made of? So we have text inside the button. We have a link. So this is actually probably more of a link, but from the perspective of the content creator, it's still a button. So maybe it's an A element with a link to somewhere. But you might also have some variations of this button. So this is essentially our basic construct. These are the things that a content creator would see when they wanted to add a button to a page. So how do you create one of these using single directory components? You've probably seen single directory components being talked about as well. It's a fairly hot topic, so I'm not going to dive too deep into those. But the key part here is that we have, I don't have a laser here, but on the left, what we have is we have the properties. So we have essentially a schema of what are the inputs that this component can take. Each of the properties include a human readable title, and then what is the type of that? Is it just text, which is with a type string, or maybe it's an enum where you have a pre-selected options that you want the content creator to select from. Then you have a markup file where you essentially said, okay, this is how we are going to use these inputs that we get. We're going to use this A element and wrap it with a div. And that's how essentially we end up with the nicely designed button. So now here's where the sort of more magical piece comes in, is that now Experience Builder goes in, it reads your single directory components and says, let's allow the content creator to add this to a page, and it just generates you a form automatically based on what you had defined in that component YAML file. So you don't have to go into the Drupal UI to say, okay, I want these Drupal fields in here. We just generate the Drupal fields automatically based on the single directory components properties that we have there. If you make changes to these properties, it gets automatically updated on the form as well as you make those changes. So let's take a look at how we could use one of these components. We already saw component being added to a page. As a content creator, if you want to create a new page, what you're going to do is you're going to just go into the navigator, you're going to click new, and then it opens up that new page. You can edit the title of the page, which in this case is not even being really displayed on the page because landing pages often don't have a title, so we're not showing them by default. And you didn't have to exit the Experience Builder at all to get this done, to be able to get to creating a new page. So this is how you can see that a lot of the steps that are being taken today in the existing Drupal UI are being moved into this new interface. You can list your pages, so you can navigate to them, or you can create new ones in here. All right. I have this recording, luckily, on my computer. So I had a little bit of a challenge where these GIF files that I'm adding, they are like 50 megabytes each. So I have them as a video file that I can then show from my computer. So let me just figure out where they are. All right.
That desktop is so
It's the secondary desktop, so you don't want to see my primary desktop. All right. So this is another demo where I'm now starting to actually create content. I'm not going to try to figure out how to put it on full screen. I'm just going to make it bigger, and then we can watch it. So what I'm doing here is we can see when we go into the components, we can see a live preview that is generated on demand, so you don't have to upload in screenshots of your components. We also have, besides components, so components are just your direct single directory components. Inside the sections, we can content creators or you as a site builder can create predefined applications of your components. So they can include content, or they can consist of multiple components. So for example, here, this. Let me pause this because this is a little bit too fast in my liking. So let me go back. What I'm doing here is we can see that there's a button, and it's a separate component that was directly added to that hero because it's a section. So you can have multiple components. So it's essentially a tree of different things. You could have 100 components, different kinds of content in there. And that way you can accelerate the process of creating content because now you don't have to create all of these compositions yourself. And that way you can also still provide the freedom of allowing your content creators to do their own compositions of components. So you can add a slot where you can add any component in there, and then the content creator can define how do they actually want to use that slot. What I did here was I deleted that button, so we can see that those section compositions you can essentially then, as a content creator, go and delete, and you can kind of deconstruct it yourself if you want to. Now, some of the magical piece of Experience Builder is that if you don't like that change, you can just click the undo button and it takes you back with the previous change that you just did. So you can trial and error as you wish with your changes.
Does that work with any kind of content type or just for pages?
Right now, this only works with pages, but it's going to be, before we release 1.0, it's going to work with any type of content types. I'm going to have a demo of, or a screenshot of how that looks like in a while. All right. I'm going to show another demo, what happens then after we are done with the creating of pages. All right. All right, so now I'm done with this page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to preview these pages. So I click the preview, so I can see how it looks like on the front end of the site. I can interact with the page if I want to. On the top right, there's this Review Changes panel, where I can see all of the changes that I've done in Experience Builder. As I mentioned, all of the changes are being saved automatically, so there wasn't any sort of save step. So this last step of clicking the button is actually where you just publish those changes that you made before. You could be making changes to multiple pages, multiple components, anything that you can add in Experience, but you can just accumulate all of those changes and then publish them all at once. So let's say you have your university's 2026 application period coming in, and you have to update half of your site to match that. You can go in there, make all of those changes, and then publish them when you're ready to publish them. All right. I need to try to find my slides again. Okay, so we saw creating a page and publishing it. Let's move on to the next example of creating a page template. So the page template is essentially what is under the block layout today. However, we've now moved it to Experience Builder, and we've made it a little bit more visual experience. So what we can see on this left sidebar layers panel is we can see header and footer. They are the two regions that we have available in this theme. What we can do with that is we can essentially click in to the header, and it opens up another set of layers, which is now specific to the header. You can place blocks, or you can use components to build this. So your Drupal blocks, they are not inside the library, they are inside this database icon in the top bar. So all of your blocks are available there. So let's say maybe you want to add your site branding block. You can just grab it from there and add it to the header. The great thing is now you can actually construct these headers as a no-code builder, because if you just have components in place, you would be able to use some sort of a header component. You could have multiple header components to choose from, and then you just construct that together inside the Experience Builder. Now we're getting to from my perspective, to the more exciting and more complicated stuff. So content type templates. It's a very interesting concept to me. As there was already a question about sort of any content that exists in Drupal, which is nodes, what we are kind of right now calling CMS content, and then we have pages that are just one of pages. The focus of the CMS content is essentially you want to create one type of pages or one type of content and display them consistently. It could be either with one template, or it could be multiple templates. Like you maybe have a page, and then you have a card, and you have a teaser. Whereas with pages, it's very hard for you to create something like a teaser because it doesn't have that consistency. It's it's just like a one-off type of thing that like maybe let's say something that you might use for building navigational pages on your site. Like let's say maybe the page that links to all of your university's departments might be something where you want to do something a little bit more fancy than just a list, and there wouldn't necessarily be a nice way to show that listing in a card. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you could then reuse that. The key difference is that the CMS content is very data-centric, and that's where you would have the data that you have in the content type sort of driving the outline of that content. Whereas with pages, it's more centered around the design. So we can kind of dive into this example where we created the component. So this was essentially more around the pages example, where it's very driven by the design. So how do we now map this into something that is data-driven? So that's where the integration comes in with the properties. So in Experience Builder, you could have multiple ways in which you enter or where we retrieve content to these components. So what we saw as an example in the pages was essentially what we call inline content. So it's essentially the use case where a content creator goes in, adds a component, and just inline within that instance adds content to the component. However, there's this other way, which is a dynamic source. You could think of it almost like the tokens that we have today. However, in Experience Builder, we are not using tokens because the challenge with the tokens is that they are not typed in any way. You could get any sort of arbitrary data in there, and it makes it very challenging then to consume them. So let's say if you have an image as a token, it's very hard to figure out, okay, let's say if we want to apply an image style on top of that image, how would we do that? Instead, if you have the object of an image going through the whole pipeline, you can then do modifications on top of that later on in this process. So now, where could these dynamic sourced inputs come from? So we could have those coming in from entity system fields. So you could have like your title, for example, and then you want to display that in, let's say, your hero components text. Or maybe, for example, the URL that you have in here, maybe that's you're creating a list, and you would just want to link that to that page that is underlined there. So you don't want to be specifying that manually for each item. You could actually also map these into external APIs, because these are essentially just, they're typed data. So we could theoretically say that, okay, go read this API and map that data into this field. So how would this look like from a visual perspective? How would you, as a site builder, then define this? So we have this little link icon on top of the, next to the URL. You click link variable inside that panel, and then it provides you all of the fields that could be mapped into a URL. And we have just one link field, and that's what is shown in there.
Is there a way to like drill down? Like, let's say you have a taxonomy reference with a taxonomy has a field on it. You can get to that.
So yes, I don't have a design of how that looks like right now, but from like technical architectural perspective, we can drill. There's many examples where we would have to be able to do something like that. So it is something we will be adding to this eventually. Yeah. So now we're getting to the question of can you edit just pages, or can you edit any type of content with Experience Builder? So Experience Builder is going to support not only editing pages, but also editing CMS content. This is the design of how that experience looks like currently, where we would make the right sidebar a little bit bigger, because now you would have a little bit, because this is a content-centric editing mode. Now we would actually then make that form wider, but we would still show a preview what the page would look like. That way you can edit in the single interface both your layout and the content. So you can almost imagine if you are using Layout Builder today, where you have to navigate between the layout and edit tabs, where now both of those screens are within Experience Builder. Now if you click the preview, it then makes the content again go sort of more in the background and makes it more narrow, and now you can do the visual editing of the page. And then if you go back to the content, it's going to allow that to take more space, and then you are in the more content focused editing mode. So one common question that I get about Experience Builder is that many of you have heard from the Dries node is that Experience Builder is being built with React, and this is sort of a direction where we are going more towards JavaScript. Am I going to be able to extend Experience Builder going forward? That's something that we a lot do for our work, so it's a fair question. So I'm going to show how modules can integrate with Experience Builder using JavaScript. The reason that modules would probably primarily be integrating with Experience Builder with JavaScript is that in order to have that sort of cohesive integrated experience within Experience Builder and to have a consistent user experience, these integrations would have to be built in JavaScript. It's kind of similar to what happened with CKEditor 4 versus CKEditor 5, where with CKEditor 4 we were writing a lot of our extensions in PHP, but it meant that in order to actually insert something into CKEditor 4, you kind of went to a PHP-based modal dialog to do the editing, and then you went back into CKEditor. Now with now with CKEditor 5, everything is written in JavaScript and it's well integrated with the tool itself. So we have a little bit of that same problem with Experience Builder, where the reason we are forced into going into JavaScript is that we want that integrated experience to continue in here. So in this example, I'm going to open from the extensions panel on the top bar the AI extension. So we click the AI extension from there, and it opens up a modal. So this modal is it's something that just opens up as a layer on top of Experience Builder. You can drag it, you can resize it, and you can still interact with Experience Builder when it's there. This extension will be able to read the context of what you have in the Experience Builder page. It can see that you've selected this component, and it can then react to that. So you could specifically say that, let's say we have a fixed grammar functionality of the AI extension in here. So what it could do is you would select a component from the preview, and then the fixed grammar would basically react to the fact that you've now selected this one, and it could help you fix grammar of that specific component. Something that's interesting about the way that these forms on the right side work is that even though we are building the whole interface in React, is that these are powered by Form API, essentially, behind the scenes. So we're just taking the form API output, and then instead of using PHP for rendering form API, we're now using React and JavaScript for rendering them. This means that many existing modules work without modifications. There are some examples that are a little bit more complicated in terms of integration. So for example, we've worked a lot with integrating media library, which uses Ajax system pretty heavily. So if you have modules that are using Ajax system heavily with the forms, those are the most likely that require some modifications in order for them to work with Experience Builder. Just because we have so much JavaScript going on inside the Experience Builder, and we have the preview, which is dynamically updating based on what's happening on the form. That's where that's the reason why some of those extensions need some updates. But if you're just modifying, doing some minor thing in your PHP side of things, then it should work just as it is today. So there's examples of, like, for example, the meta tag module comes with its own field widget, and it just works out of the box with Experience Builder. We don't have to make any changes to it. All right, I'm going to jump into the big question that I'm betting that many folks in the room have, which is that how am I going to actually get into this? How can I actually use this? How can I migrate from my existing tool, whether that's Layout Builder or Paragraphs? We're still in the beginning phases of figuring out migrations, but we've defined some key principles of how we would like these migrations to work. So for first, we want to avoid forcing existing sites to migrate as long as we can. So if you're happy with whatever you're using today, if you're using Paragraphs and Layout Builder, and that's all good, you're probably going to be, those solutions are going to be supported for a good while. So I don't think you have to stress over that. However, if you're interested in this new experience that Experience Builder provides, if you want to move over there, we want to provide an as easy way as possible for folks to get from the current experience to what is in this new Experience Builder focused world. So we're going to focus on that second bullet of how do we then allow moving on from the existing solutions if you want to Experience Builder. So the first part of our approach is that we will focus on allowing multiple solutions to work at the same time. So what that means is that you can enable Experience Builder, and it doesn't mean that you have to disable Paragraphs or Layout Builder from all of your content. You could have Experience Builder be side by side with whatever you have existing today. For example, if you just want to use Experience Builder for your landing pages and have specific types of users coming there, you're totally fine. That's something that you can do, and you don't have to worry about whatever content you have in the current content types. So, and I believe that that's actually probably something that a lot of people are going to be doing in the beginning, is because that's how you can, with very low effort, you could get your content creators be able to create new content using Experience Builder. So how that could look like is as simple as, let's say, for example, in the content types, we would provide a use Experience Builder setting in there. So per content type basis, you could say, okay, this content type is going to be using Experience Builder, and then you kind of move over everything from there. However, we are looking into as well, not just allowing where it's per content type, where we could do that even per content basis, so that you could enable it on a content type and then migrate content slowly over from there. But the second part is that we want to integrate with existing assets. So that's the blocks, layouts, paragraphs, whatever you use today to build your components. So today, if your content creators go into Layout Builder, they're probably adding either blocks or paragraphs in there. We want you to be able to use Experience Builder without having to migrate all of those blocks or paragraphs into Experience Builder. You might not be able to benefit from all of the user experience benefits that Experience Builder comes with, unless you migrate these into single directory components and more Experience Builder focused things. But you would be at least able to get some of the benefits for you, because of many of the things like the undo, redo, autosave, all of that. It works with all of these things. They're not specific to single directory components in any way. We want to provide a consistent experience in that regard. So that comes back to this slide that I showed you earlier, where we can have Experience Builder components coming in from multiple sources. So we can have these single directory components coming from your code base, but then we can have blocks for things like menus or views coming in from the block plugins. And then even layouts, if you're using Layout Builder or layout paragraphs, we want to be able to allow those to exist in Experience Builder so that you don't have to convert those to SDCs either. The great thing is that this is already working with Experience Builder, so you can already add blocks in there. So it's all working, and you can test it out. It works for blocks that don't have context right now. So context is essentially blocks where it would have to get, for example, let's say, page title might be a poor example because it's not actually used in context, but it's an easy example where page title is essentially displaying the page title of the current page, so it has a dependency on that. So those types of blocks are not fully functional right now, but we are adding support for those as well. So block support is definitely coming in there. And so kind of what I was getting into earlier already, getting a little bit of head start, is that we want to provide that tooling then to move your existing content within the content types that are using that are using Layout Builder or paragraphs into Experience Builder. If your content types are not using Layout Builder or paragraphs, it's probably going to be pretty straightforward to migrate to Experience Builder. If you are using Layout Builder, if you're only using Layout Builder to build the managed display, if you don't allow Layout Builder overrides, again, it's probably fairly straightforward to migrate to Experience Builder from that. However, with Layout Builder, if you are using the Layout Builder overrides, that's when it's going to be a little bit more involved process to get into Experience Builder, because you would have a lot of different pages that would have to be migrated. That's where this third step then comes in. And that's where we're imagining that we could have content types include content that are both built using Layout Builder and Experience Builder. And then we would allow essentially the content creator to make a decision on whether they want to continue using the current mechanism of how the page was built, or if they want to move that to Experience Builder. The great thing about this approach is that when we think about migrating content, it's a lot easier for us to get to like 80-90% of like it almost looks good. But there's a few tiny things that are might be broken. So the great thing about if we make this the content creator's responsibility is that they can then go in and do that QA quality assurance for us, and they can if there's some tiny things that they need to fix, they can just go and tweak those as they're making the changes. If they go in and click the move to Experience Builder and then it's the page just explodes, they can click back, go back to the classic editor, and they can continue with that, and they can call the site builder or developer that, hey, this needs a bit of fixing. This isn't really working right now. So as I said, this is all still sort of in the beginning stages of the development. We are figuring out our plans for how this is all going to work. We are looking for help around this. So we've identified potential leaders for leading like a separate group to focus on the migration aspect of Experience Builder. So if you're interested in being part of that, either by just helping to build something, or if you're interested in funding folks to work as part of this, reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you with the people who we are targeting to lead this initiative. We're probably going to have a little bit more of an update to give on this in Atlanta, so stay tuned, and that's when we would hear more what is going to happen. All right, so the final topic of the agenda was the exclusive preview. So now we are getting to that part. It is the theme builder. It's the theme builder of the Experience Builder. So this has never been really talked in any presentation before, at least by me or Dries. So that's why it's quite exclusive at this point. So you may have seen a mission statement of Experience Builder. I've shown this to you in my sessions before. I think Dries might have shown this in one of his blog posts as well. There's one key part that I want to highlight, which is that we want Experience Builder to allow site builders to easily theme and build their entire website using only their browser. And if we want to do these things in browser, single directory components don't quite get us there because you have to leave the browser to build those components at that point. So how do we change that? You're going to look into this building components part. How do we build components? How do we manage site design? I'm going to focus on the building components aspect of this in sort of this part, but it also connects to site design part. So this is the third time I'm showing this slide, and I'm going to make a tiny addition to it. We have this concept of JavaScript components. So if you're building decoupled sites, or if you just want to build components in the browser, this is definitely something that should be very interesting for you. So it looks like we reached the limit of the GIF size, so I'll need to look for the video again. Luckily, I had the backup of the videos in here, because otherwise we would be. So this is also a demo of the actual Experience Builder, how this works. So I'm creating a new component with an Experience Builder. It opens up the code editor where we can see a preview of that component, which is generated real-time live within the browser. I'm copy-pasting a component that I essentially took from a website that provides Tailwind written components. It just works in there. And what I'm now doing is I'm building properties for that component inside Experience Builder. We can use the example value, and we can see that the example value is essentially what would be added in Experience Builder when someone added this component to the page, and we can see that update in the live preview in there.
It's the problem being the first one after lunch, isn't it?
Huh?
It's the problem being the first session after lunch.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go back to my slide deck again.
Quick question, that can use a vanilla web component, or does it have to be a React?
So it has to be React, and you can use Tailwind in there because of, so we were considering Twig as an option, but the challenge with Twig is that it's PHP. So there's challenges where we would most likely not be able to get hosting companies to actually allow us to do that within their environments, because of it then allows you to write PHP in there.
Vanilla JavaScript.
Oh, vanilla JavaScript.
Yeah.
So I guess, so the code editor that we have in here is quite specific to React. However, there's a CLI tool which allows you to actually upload components that are built differently. So you could use any framework, or anything. You could use even web components with that. So you would be essentially able to go outside of React with the CLI tool. But we can change what we use in the browser. It's not it is hard coded, but it's not fundamental. The reason we have to pick one is because we have to do the compiling of this inside the browser. So we need to pick one so that we can say that, okay, this actually works for the framework that you're doing, and it can be all done in your browser instead of in a server, because otherwise you would have a dependency on Node.js on this. So I would say that vanilla.js is probably not part of the question, but you should be able to use other frameworks, and including web components with the CLI tool.
Question. Speaking of dependencies, how do you manage dependencies within the browser editor? So typically if you're using an IDE,
Yep.
you can install packages, etc. Is that a similar experience that we're looking at here? So if I want to build a component that's built or requires like another dependency, how would I do that?
Yeah, so you will be able to write an import at the top of the component. We will be also looking into adding an actual button, which allows you to then browse a list of your components, and it will automatically add the imports for you to sort of manage the loading of the other components. So you will be able to build trees of components.
So where is it getting the information for the imports from? So is it like pre-installed already, like somewhere outside of the browser? So I can't see the screen from here. What are you importing? Where's that file?
Yeah, so we are using import maps to define some predefined imports, and we are even looking into options where you can expand the import maps from there, so you can add additional dependencies to the import map in there. So it is sort of geared towards just the use case of having something very easy for someone to come in, it's pre-set up for you, everything is figured out, but it has the power of actually being able to extend it beyond that. With the CLI tool, you can also upload, additional things in there, so you will be able to add, if you don't have what you need, you will be able to do that as well.
Where is this stored? Is this version controlled? Is this in git config and import export? Like, where is this?
It gets stored in Drupal's config system. So what we do is we essentially store in Drupal's config system the source file and the compiled file, and then on demand when we need to render the component, we write the latest version to the files directory of the Drupal, so it's not constantly looking for that from the config system. It's very similar to Twig. It's just that we are reading from config instead of the file system with SDC. So Twig is also compiled into the files directory today because we need to do performance optimizations on those. What was I about to say? So the CLI tool will also add. So you can use a CLI tool, and you can have a component tree that is outside of here, and you can then import your components that are not built with React, and they will appear then in Experience Builder as well. And in that case, you can just have code components, the JavaScript components that are built inside, as almost like a mini React application inside your code base.
So that would make it allow you to bring it back to your VS Code editor and get back to your editor experience then.
So you can't go to this experience back with those components, but in that case you would be managing those components inside the code base. So you can get them to the content creators and build them in JavaScript.
The editor being the coder.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Back to coder, the power tool that you use.
Yes. So you can use VS Code or PHP, WebStorm, whatever if you want, and then use the CLI. You can do that either as a CI pipeline, which we are envisioning that that's probably going to be the primary way in how people are going to use this, is that they set up a CI that automatically then just adds those things to their Drupal site when they make a release.
A question that I've had that I think this might answer, I've had this question for a long time. Building components in Experience Builder, there's a happy path if you write those components in Twig. This seems to be the path if somebody wanted to write native React components and get them to work with Experience Builder without writing any Twig ever.
Yeah.
And you're saying there's a CLI tool that would allow, just imagine a developer that has never touched Drupal before but is very experienced with React. You're saying with the CLI tool, they could find a path to getting those components to surface in Experience Builder.
Yes, and they don't have to be React. They can be Vue.js, or they can use several different frameworks of what are supported right now. So we are using Astro Islands to render these components. So anything that Astro Islands support is essentially what you will be able to build components with when you use the CLI tool.
Okay.
So when you place one of these components on the page, it's rendered on the client side?
Yes.
Side.
Yes. Right now we only have support for client-side rendering. However, conceptually we have looked into that. We will be able to add server-side rendering of these components as well. However, we are not targeting the server-side rendering of the JavaScript components for 1.0 because of it's a little bit more complicated to get that working. But it is on the backlog for us. All right, I'm gonna jump back to my slides then. We're almost done, and I can take more questions then. I just wanted to kind of give, because I have the last section, which is where are we today, so we can kind of look into that to put everything in perspective. So we did an early preview of Experience Builder at around DrupalCon Barcelona last September. It was just to validate the user experience and see what kind of feedback are we going to get for Experience Builder. And then now, as we're nearing DrupalCon Atlanta, we are very close to getting to this early preview 2, which is where we would be including a lot of the things that I just showed in these videos and GIFs in my presentation. Hopefully, the early preview 2 works better than the GIFs in my slides. I hope the experience is not the same. So, but we'll see. We are almost there. Oh yeah, and sorry, I need to go back. Probably what is important as well to mention is that we are targeting that stable release for Q3 this year. We are currently thinking probably somewhere around September is because the ultimate goal is to get this out before DrupalCon Vienna, and we are pretty well on track for that. We have been targeting end of July, and that will be a little bit harder for us to meet, but we think that September is pretty realistic for us to accomplish. So definitely means that if you are building Drupal sites, it's probably worth starting to think about how are you going to use Experience Builder once it comes out. So, what can I do today? What can I do to help? How can I be part of this? If you have any feedback on the vision or the plan that we have in place, I'm going to be around here until pretty late tomorrow, so come talk to me. And if you want to share feedback outside of the conference, you can reach out on Slack or write issues in the Experience Builder issue queue. Be very open to discussing any type of feedback that you might have. That could be questions around use cases that you might have. Is it going to support it? Or, all goes, all fair game. Something that is very helpful for us, but also probably for everyone building Drupal sites today, is starting to think about how are you going to be using single directory components. Single directory components and using them, building them is the best way to make sure that you are going to be compatible with Experience Builder when it comes out. The move between Experience Builder, these browser-created components, and single directory components is a much smaller gap than it is to go from, let's say, a fully template and CSS-built theme that many of us have today. So single directory components is a really good way to start getting ready for Experience Builder. We also, surprise, surprise, we have many issues in the Experience Builder queue. So if you are interested in helping, I'm happy to identify ways in which you can get involved. We also have this concept of tracks within Experience Builder. So we have some companies like, let's say, Accelerant, for example, is working very closely with me, and they have a team of developers who we align on goals every once a quarter, and then essentially I work very closely with their team to make sure that they are being productive and they get the need that they need, that they get the help that they need. So if you're interested in being a track lead, let me know, and I'm happy to carve out a piece of Experience Builder that you could own, and then work very closely with the team to make sure that you have the support that you need to succeed on the track. So the key links are the Experience Builder issue queue, so that's the Experience Builder project on Drupal.org, and then Experience Builder channel on Drupal Slack. So that's about the content that I have. Do we have any questions? Looks like we do.
I saw those Tailwind classes in there. So Tailwind is that going to be like you're shipping that with Experience Builder?
Yes.
And I'm assuming that will only be loaded if it's required, though. It's not always going to be there?
So it will be loaded if you're using those components. That it's a dependency of the components that you create. So if you don't have a single component that uses Tailwind, it shouldn't load Tailwind in that case.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Very similar to how libraries work in general. Yeah.
I have more questions, but I don't want to monopolize.
Just to piggyback on that same question though, that's just a natural consequence of how Experience Builder built those specific components. If you started on day one, gutted every component that Experience Builder provided, created all your components, you never would have to worry about Tailwind. Yes.
Yeah, you wouldn't have it's a dependency of the components that you create with Experience Builder, and we add the dependency automatically, regardless of if you use Tailwind or not. And so yeah, in that sense, it is very tightly coupled with the components that you create within Experience Builder. If you never create those or use those components, you're good. However, the expectation is that as a community, we are probably going to move towards building more stuff with Tailwind. Which means that, let's say you go to Drupal.org, maybe there's default components that you can use with Experience Builder. They probably will come with Tailwind because that's what exists in Experience Builder. All right, Martin.
On the timeline slide you had, I didn't see the theme builder in there. Is that like a hard dependency for the 1.0 release?
Yes, so we actually, it's in here sort of implied. So we're targeting the front-end developer persona with the early preview 2, and the early preview 2 will include what I just showed in the demo for the theme builder. So it is part of the 1.0 release as well. We're pretty close to getting that work actually in a place where it can be shipped. So we are really close to that early preview 2 milestone.
Yeah, with that, are you guys looking at integrating with any design systems like Storybook? Because if you have React Storybook, it already has basically what you built done. So if there's an import or connection, front-end devs or organizational design systems should be able to just import all their components.
Yeah.
Is that part of the roadmap yet?
So that's part of the CLI tool, I would say. But we also have, so as part of the CLI tool process, that's where we are looking into, like, how do I bring a design system that has to be built in Storybook and bring it into the Drupal. However, we are also looking into how do we leverage something like Storybook for the components that you created within the Experience Builder experience as well. That's not part of our 1.0 scope right now, but it is something that we believe that we want to add eventually. And probably someone will just build that because of, it's a tool that so many of us are using.
And very also similar, if you're using the Gutenberg block editor now, which this appears to be very similar to, would those work eventually? Not this first pass, but down the road.
So there is some folks who are experimenting already with the idea of being able to use Gutenberg blocks in here, and I think there is like a proof of concept of that already. So that's not part of the official Experience Builder initiative, but community is actually experimenting with that already. We had questions in here.
So will Experience Builder ship in theory with like some example components like you're showing today? But then the majority of it would actually be in your theme, right? You would be building your custom components for your design system.
So the goal is to not have components inside Experience Builder. We will be adding something that we call elements that are very they're more lower level. They're less styled. They're more atomic. But then what we're working with MediaCar and with you all to build a default design system that we ship with in Drupal CMS, so that you have a starting point that comes with like a opinionated list of components and a system to actually develop that into a branded site. And that's where then you get those default components that you can start with.
You mentioned extensibility earlier and how it works. It plays nicely with what exists, the form API, etc. Probably plugins and whatever else you build that affects forms to the admin.
Yeah.
But extending it outside of that, like thinking it more from the perspective of extending Experience Builder.
Yeah.
Is that a React app? Like that's where my bread and butter is to do extensions to.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are going to be built in React. We might be looking into other ways to build things in there, but right now it's only React that's the only type of extensions that we allow for Experience Builder right now.
Okay, maybe we can move this into a box in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. You just hear my ear.